trying to understand narcissists from our perspective can be extremely confusing. Narcissists perceive the world in a completely different way than most people do. And this includes the things that they consider threatening or nightmarish. So a narcissist's worst nightmare is something that looks completely different from what you might consider your worst nightmare. Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I'm not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. In this video, I'm going to first describe a scenario that might describe a narcissist's worst nightmare. And then I'm going to describe how this feels to them and why it feels the way it does to them. And then I'm going to describe exactly what in the real world can happen to cause these feelings of worst nightmare. What I imagine a narcissist's perfect worst nightmare would be to be stuck in a room full of people that cannot see or hear the narcissist, to be stuck in a room full of people that are completely ignoring the narcissist. I know I've actually had nightmares like this, and it's probably from interacting too much with narcissists, because narcissists can actually make you feel this way. But it's also a narcissist's worst nightmare, to be stuck in a room with a whole bunch of people that can't seem to hear or see you. Basically, to be ignored, to be made to feel as if you don't exist, to be made to feel completely irrelevant, to be made to feel that you're so unimportant that people can't even see or hear you. This would be any narcissist's worst nightmare. And I know this scenario is something that probably would never actually happen in real life. It actually is some kind of nightmare. But some examples of something that could be similar to this in the real world would be maybe in a work environment, not getting credit for the things that you're doing. Maybe somebody else is getting credit for your work. Or another example would be trying to provoke somebody, trying to stir up drama or spread rumors, and nobody's responding to you. Nobody's really taking your rumors seriously. Nobody's emotionally reacting or causing drama based on the things that you're throwing out there. Maybe another example could be being at a party, maybe actually being in a room full of people, and it's not that these people can't see or hear you, but maybe they're preoccupied with somebody else at the party and you're not the center of attention. That could also feel like the worst nightmare for a narcissist. So why would this be the narcissist's worst nightmare? Narcissists need to feel relevant. They need to feel important. They need to feel like the only person that matters. And this is to counteract and block out the real things that they actually believe about themselves, the beliefs that they're constantly trying to drown out and hide and counter. They really believe that they are the most worthless, bottom-feeding piece of garbage that ever existed in the world, and they spend every minute of every day of their lives trying to block that out, trying to make themselves feel like the most important person in the world, like the only person that matters, the most relevant, powerful person that controls everything. And they need this false persona of theirs to be this huge and powerful in order for it to be big enough to block out how poorly they actually feel about themselves. And they accomplish this through what we call supply, through external validation, through different ways that people pay attention to them and make them feel important. They cannot do this on their own. They cannot feed their own ego. They cannot give themselves any kind of validation or self-worth. They need a constant stream of it coming from the outside world. And nothing they get from the outside world lasts very long, because none of it is a permanent or healthy solution to these extreme emotional problems that they have. So to a narcissist, this feels like they're drowning in themselves. They're constantly trying to keep afloat within their own persona, within their own body, their own identity, this giant black hole that they're constantly sinking into. They need constant external validation pulling them out of that hole. Some of them actually feel as if some sort of malevolent entity is chasing them or living within them. Some of them feel as if they're being constantly drained, like a bucket with a hole in the bottom that's constantly draining, that they have to constantly fill with water. They feel like they're under constant threat. Being ignored, being made to feel irrelevant is like an emergency to them. This is not just something that makes them feel bad about themselves or makes them upset like it would a normal person. This is something that's an all-out life or death emergency. Life for a narcissist is like they are living in a sinking boat. They live in a boat that's constantly sinking. It's got a hole in the bottom, and they are constantly bailing water out of this boat. And maybe they have a really big bucket sometimes, and maybe it's a small bucket sometimes, but they're constantly bailing water out of this boat that's constantly filling and threatening them with sinking. And external validation or supply is the bucket they need to keep scooping the water out of this boat that is constantly sinking. And they can't stop for a minute to think about anything else or to concentrate on anything else. They certainly can't stop for a minute to think about how their actions are affecting other people. And when you suddenly take that bucket away from them, that's their worst nightmare. Narcissists feel as if for their entire lives, they are constantly battling with other people, competing with other people to always stay at the top of a heap of people. And they always have to be at the very, very top of this mountain of people. And if they can't stay at the very top of this mountain, then they're going to be pulled over, overtaken, smothered. It's the end of the world. They have to be at the very, very top, or they're going to be completely overcome. And all of these horrible feelings, these doomsday scenarios, are really existing in their head. I mean, life really isn't a constant threat. Every person in the whole world really isn't out to get you. You can trust people, you can be vulnerable, but narcissists can't stop for a minute to even think about those things because they feel such a constant feeling of threat. And anybody that tries to tell them, hey, you don't need to live in constant panic, everyone's not out to get you, they're just going to see that person as somebody that's trying to trick them. Now, I know some of you people clicked on this video probably hoping that you could be the narcissist's worst nightmare, and you can temporarily. But I also just want to remind everybody that there really is no great effective way of getting revenge on a narcissist that's really going to help you heal. There really isn't. I think the harder you try to make a narcissist pay, to make a narcissist see what they've done, the more of your own energy you're giving to something that it really is a huge waste of time. And that's really what the narcissist wants. The narcissist wants you to spend a whole bunch of time and energy trying to think of how to teach them a lesson. And with all these things I'm about to say about specific things that cause a narcissist to feel this worst nightmare scenario, none of these things are really effective ways of teaching the narcissist a lesson. The narcissist, unfortunately, is never going to feel sorry for what they've done to probably to you or people that you know. The narcissist is never going to take accountability, or probably never going to take accountability for anything that they've done. It's extremely unlikely. And it's even more unlikely if you're actively trying to convince them to take accountability for what they've done. There are things you can do that will make a narcissist very uncomfortable and maybe even cause them to panic, but there isn't anything that you can do that they're going to perceive as justifiable revenge. Even if they can see that you're making them uncomfortable and you're trying to hurt them, and even if you're succeeding a little bit, that's just going to feed more into their ego. They're going to be able to just flip that around and turn it into victim mode. Oh, I'm such a victim. And that's supply. That makes them feel relevant, that you're taking so much time to try to pick on them. And now they've got all this material they can use to make you look bad, make them look like the good guy, make them look like the victim, and also make themselves feel really important at all this time and energy you're spending on them. If your goal is to teach the narcissist a lesson, I completely understand. I've been there. I get it. If there was a way to teach a narcissist a lesson, I would have figured it out by now. I would have done it 100 times over. But I'm convinced that there just is no way to do this. Narcissism is specifically set up to avoid this, to help narcissists avoid accountability forever. That's what narcissism is to help a narcissist always feel like they're in the right, they're the most important person, they're infallible, they're incapable of making mistakes. That's what narcissism is. For you to teach the narcissist a lesson where the narcissist is going to stop and say, oh, I guess I shouldn't have treated that person so bad. That's probably not a narcissist if that person's really capable of self-reflection like that. Okay, so what are some specific things that actually cause a narcissist to feel like they're living in their worst nightmare? I think the biggest one, the most important one, is when a narcissist feels like they're losing control of somebody that they once controlled. If you were somebody that they could count on to make them feel good about themselves, maybe by picking on you or making you feel like you had to try harder, or just letting off some steam and treating you like an emotional punching bag and then seeing how upset you got and seeing how much control they had over you. If you were someone that they counted on for that, you became a kind of emotional crutch. You became an easy go-to for them when they were feeling down or feeling insecure or afraid or uncomfortable. They could just go to you, pull out their regular bag of tricks, and they'd feel better in no time. Of course, you would feel horrible, confused, frightened, hurt, whatever, but they don't care about that. When that suddenly stops working, this is like the end of the world to them, especially if they don't have a backup plan, if they don't have anyone else that's really as reliable as you've been. This is a huge, huge deal. This is the worst nightmare for a narcissist. And I have a whole video on narcissistic collapse. And I really think that this is the biggest cause. I'm kind of guessing, but I really think this is probably the biggest cause of narcissistic collapse. And it's something that can cause narcissistic collapse very quickly when a narcissist just suddenly doesn't have their regular go-to. To lose control of somebody that they counted on is like that person bailing water out of a boat, and maybe they've had a trusty bucket that they've been using to just keep bailing water out of that boat, and maybe they've been doing it for years with no problem, and then suddenly somebody takes that bucket away and they don't have a backup bucket. I mean, it's Panicsville for them. It really is the end of the world. Now, what can cause them to feel like they don't have control over you anymore are some specific things. I think the biggest thing is that you no longer care about what they think. And you really can't fake this. When I say you don't care what they think, I mean you have stopped trying to make them happy. You have finally figured out that no matter how hard you try, nothing's ever going to be good enough. Nothing's ever going to be worth it. It's not worth putting all your time and effort into trying to make them happy. When that clicks and you suddenly realize, like, I don't need to try to make this person happy anymore because it's impossible. I don't need to keep worrying about whether or not this person's upset with me or not because they always are. When that clicks and you just stop trying, that's a big part of what makes the narcissist realize that they're not in control of you the same way they were. And of course, another huge sign that they don't have control is if you actually tell them or you actually put into action a plan that says that you want to leave. You don't need this person anymore. Whatever control they had over you, whatever they were giving you that you needed that kept you dependent on them is gone, and you don't need them anymore. That's a huge loss of control, and that will absolutely freak them out. And this is why narcissists hoover people. This is why some of them have such a hard time letting go of relationships, such a hard time letting go of somebody that they seemed to despise. It's why a narcissist can be constantly insulting you, infuriated with you, making you feel like you can't do anything right, making you feel like you're making them miserable. And then when you try to leave, suddenly they love you. You're the greatest thing that ever happened to them. They can't live without you. It's really confusing, right? Well, it's just this panic mode of suddenly like, oh my gosh, I didn't think this person was ever actually going to leave me. Like, narcissists really think that they can pile on all the abuse in the world, and if you took it once, you'll take it again and again and again, and that there's no end to it. You'll just keep putting up with their abuse. And if you take them back after you leave, that just tells them even more so that they can do whatever they want. And okay, there might be some bumpy road, but you'll always come back to them. They can do whatever they want, and there really are no consequences. They really believe this. So when there suddenly are some real consequences, it's a panic for them. It's their worst nightmare. And after you have broken the relationship off or distanced yourself, another thing that can make a narcissist extremely uncomfortable is being ignored or not being reacted to. Ignoring is best, of course, but not being reacted to is also pretty bad. So this could be if they text you something provocative, like they text you something accusing you of something you haven't done, or they just slip some subtle misunderstanding in there, something to bait you, something to get you upset and get you defensive, and you just ignore it. Or maybe they text you, maybe they're hoovering you and they text you something about how much they love you and how much they miss that trip you went on last year and how they hope that maybe you'll still be able to buy that dream house together or whatever. They text you these little things that they think will tug at your heart, and you just ignore them. You don't text them back. You don't take the bait. This is really, really upsetting to them. It ups the ante. It further confirms that they don't have control over you anymore. And some of them can go to some extreme measures to try to regain control. And really what it's saying is that you don't care what they think. If they misunderstand you, or they accuse you of something you haven't done, or they really, really miss you and they love you so much, you don't care. You don't care anymore. Or at least you're presenting yourself as somebody that really doesn't care. That's really upsetting. It makes them feel irrelevant. It makes them feel unimportant. Now, another thing that narcissists can't stand is the feeling of being controlled by other people. And narcissists feel as if they're being controlled in situations that sometimes can seem totally reasonable to a normal person. So a narcissist doesn't have to be being controlled to the point that they control other people in order for them to feel controlled. They could just be in a situation where somebody tells them no. Or I knew an extremely narcissistic person once that was always complaining about government regulations and like rules like not being able to build a fire on a beach here. You know, you can't just go out on a beach in the US and build a fire in most places. At least that's what he complained about. He also complained about not being able to collect rainwater, but that wasn't true either. Anyway, he was always going on and on about how upset he was. I mean, he couldn't get over it. He was so upset that there were rules that he had to follow. And I think it just really drove him crazy to feel like there was some entity that could control him. Now, a big part of why narcissists are so upset about this is that they're projecting. Narcissists have to control everybody else. They have to feel like they're in complete control of everyone in their lives. Like everyone in their lives are things that they own, objects that they own. And so they're projecting that onto other people. If somebody else so much as says no to them or tries to assert a boundary, they're thinking that that person's now trying to control them the same way they're trying to control everyone else. And they're not having that. And this is why they can be so upset in a situation such as where the government imposes rules on them, situations in which they really don't have a choice. They have to follow these rules or there's severe consequences. This is why this is so upsetting for them. This feeling of being controlled can also happen if you give them an ultimatum. Like if you have left them, cut off the relationship, and then said, well, okay, we can get back together if you do A, B, and C. That's the deal. Now, if they actually decide to do A, B, and C in order to get you back, and this is a real pathological narcissist we're talking about, if they actually do these things and they take your ultimatum seriously, they are doing it in order to regain control of you, and then they're going to make you pay for all that controlling of them you tried to do, those conditions that you put down. they're going to make you pay for that, because that's one of the most threatening things, most offensive things that you can do to a narcissist, is to try to tell them what to do, especially when you try to tell them what they need to do in order to regain control of you, or that's how they're perceiving it. Because in their mind, they are entitled to control you. They own you, and you're taking something away from them that is rightfully theirs. And now you're putting conditions on it. You're telling them that they need to jump through these hoops in order to take back what's rightfully theirs. They're going to punish you for that. And that's why I highly recommend anyone that has broken off a relationship with a narcissist to always stay away and never give that person another chance. It just isn't worth the risk. So to sum it all up, narcissists live in a world where they feel constant threat. And this constant threat is the constant threat of being irrelevant, of not mattering, of having to face what they really think about themselves, of losing all these tools that they use to convince themselves that they are the opposite of what they really believe, that they are the only person that actually even exists, the only person that matters at all, and that they are so relevant and superior and important. Anything that threatens this facade, that threatens this story they're telling to themselves about themselves, is something that can very quickly cause their worst nightmare. Narcissists are much closer at any given time, much closer to experiencing their worst nightmare than any normal person is. For a normal person, their worst nightmare is usually something pretty extreme has to happen, or a process has to take place. Narcissists feel like they're always right on the brink of their worst nightmare, because their worst nightmare is just consequences of being ignored, of being treated like a normal person that maybe everyone's not focused on all the time. Their worst nightmare is just reality, real life. So it's not very hard for them to suddenly be plunged into it. And that's why they feel this constant threat, this constant sinking boat that they have to save themselves from. And I hope you'll keep all of this in mind if you're ever considering re-engaging in a relationship with a narcissist. There is no room for you in this relationship. There is no room or time or energy for the narcissist to consider your feelings, or even to consider your existence outside of how you can serve their ego. And there never will be. Your feelings don't matter. There just isn't enough emotional capacity in a narcissist to even consider that you even have feelings. These are things that a narcissist really can never overcome. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this video and would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.